Welcome to Now. Clean coal. The industry promises it, the president champions it, the government funds it. So where is it? Stay with us.
Now on PBS. On the Road with host David Brancaccio and senior correspondent Maria Hinojosa. Funding for Now is provided by the Orfila Family Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Marguerite Casey Foundation, the Nathan Cummings Foundation, the CS Fund, the Desjardins Blackman Fund, and by the following. And by the Rockefeller Foundation, supporting Blueprint America. And by contributions to your PBS stations from viewers like you. Thank you.
What if you could take America's cheapest and most plentiful energy resource and make it safe for the environment? That's the premise behind clean coal. You've probably heard the phrase in last year's presidential campaign, and you may have seen some of the ads running about it on your TV. But what exactly are they talking about? Senior correspondent Maria Hinojosa and producer Faye Moore went to Wyoming for the story, part of the PBS-wide series on the nation's infrastructure that we call Blueprint America.
Wyoming, famous for its cowboys, big skies, and roaming herds of bison. But Wyoming's dirty little secret is that its economy runs on something very different: the mining and burning of coal. Historically, coal has been an environmental nightmare, and scientists say the burning of coal is the absolute biggest contributor to global warming on the planet. So, can the industry clean up its act?
It's designed to run 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because people use electricity 24/7.
This new power plant under construction near Gillette, Wyoming, is being touted as part of the future infrastructure of clean coal. Now's investigation of clean coal begins in plants like this, but leads right to your pocketbook, with likely big increases in the cost of electricity in years to come. But what exactly is clean coal? Is it possible to clean up this very dirty fuel? And is that the answer to America's energy problem?
There's a lot of investment in a plant like this, especially this plant now. You know, the price tag of this plant is $1.35 billion.
Daryl Hill, a spokesman for Basin Electric, says this plant, called Dry Fork, will be outfitted with the latest air pollution technology.
We'll have mercury controls, ash controls, sulfur dioxide controls. So this will be a very, very clean operating power plant.
But this brand new power plant will be emitting the greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, in the exact same way as coal plants that were built 40 years ago. The United States has been called the Saudi Arabia of coal. In fact, coal powers half of our electricity. Imagine if half the lights in all the cities of the U.S. were suddenly to go out. Then you have a sense of just how dependent we've become on coal. Wyoming supplies 40% of the nation's coal. Last year alone, Wyoming produced more than 462 million tons of it, and increasingly, more and more coal pits crater the landscape of the Powder River Basin. Why is America so dependent on coal? Because it's cheap, very cheap. Although coal may be a cheap source of energy, what price do we pay in pollution and global warming? What happens when we burn coal? According to scientists, that greenhouse gas, CO2, is causing global warming, which leads to rising sea levels, loss of coastal lands, severe storms, and droughts. And fully 1/3 of the planet's greenhouse gases come from coal-burning power plants.
The risk is to the planet. The risk is to the entire kind of operating system for civilized life. You know, we are pushing the climate to dangerous extremes right now, and coal is the number one sort of engine that's pushing that.
Jeff Goodell spent 4 years investigating the coal industry for his book, Big Coal.
If the coal industry cannot figure out a way to make it so that you can burn coal and do something with the carbon dioxide, coal won't be burned. I mean, there's just no question about that. It will become the fuel of the past. And I think that one of the reasons there's such a big fight right now is the industry knows that.
That's why the coal industry says it's found an answer, and they call it clean coal.
I believe in the future.
In the future.
If you've been watching TV lately, you may have seen these commercials selling the potential of clean coal.
Clean coal, America's power.
And clean coal has found powerful political support. In fact, during last year's presidential campaign, both candidates got behind the idea.
But this is America. We figured out how to put a man on the moon in 10 years. You can't tell me we can't figure out how to burn coal.
But how will Obama's promise play out in the business of producing electricity from coal? We looked for answers to our questions during our visit to Basin Electric's plant. What we found out was that even when outfitted with the newest anti-pollution controls, it will still release all of its CO2 directly into the air through its smokestacks, just like the roughly 600 coal plants that already exist nationwide. Producing clean coal will require additional technologies. The problem is that they're still on the drawing board or have never been tested on a commercial scale. The industry currently favors a proposal to separate and remove the CO2 and inject it into vast underground rock formations thousands of feet below the Earth's surface, where, if all goes as planned, it will remain for eons.
The state of Wyoming has actually tasked their geological survey to start mapping this out in some detail.
Dr. Julio Friedman heads the U.S. government's carbon management program at Lawrence Livermore Lab. He's been studying this technology for years, and he believes there are plenty of underground storage spots in the U.S., especially in Wyoming.
Based on everything that we know, there are lots of good formations in the state of Wyoming, ones that are highly likely to accept large volumes of CO2 for a very long time.
And while Friedman is convinced that the CO2 will stay where it's injected, no one knows for sure if these storage areas will be stable over the long run. Safe storage of CO2 is the final hurdle to overcome, but the problems begin with the high cost of separating out the CO2 in the first place. And then there's the amount of energy that's required to remove the CO2 and the environmental impact of generating that additional energy. Basin Electric has started to work through some of these challenges in a plant it manages in North Dakota. It's not an electric power plant, but it does start with the raw material of coal to make synthetic fuel. What spokesman Floyd Robb says is even more intriguing is what it does with the CO2 it captures from the fuel production.
Basin Electric has the largest carbon capture and storage project in the world.
In the entire world?
In the entire world. We have sequestered over 14 million tons of carbon since the project started in 2000.
And when you say sequestered, where is this carbon, this CO2, where is it being sequestered to?
It is being sent to Canada, and it is being used to keep an oil field producing that would have been shut down by now.
That's right. A Canadian oil company is actually buying CO2, pumping it through a 200-mile pipeline, and injecting it into the ground to force the last drops of oil out of a depleted field. The CO2 is supposed to remain contained in the underground areas. But what about the plan to find underground storage areas back in the U.S. for the huge amount of CO2 that's being produced and released into the air here? Well, for now, the best the industry can say about new plants, like the one at Dry Fork, is that they're clean coal ready, which pretty much means they have a big empty field waiting to someday try out a new technology.
When this power plant, it's up and running in 2011.
Yep.
And what you like to say is that it is clean coal ready. It will be ready to be retrofitted for cleaner coal.
Specifically, if there would happen to be, when technology is developed for carbon capture, we have space on the plant site so that we can add that technology into the plant as well.
If those power plants are capture ready, well, my driveway is Ferrari ready. It's ready for a Ferrari anytime anybody wants to deliver one.
David Hawkins, Director of Climate Programs at the Natural Resources Defense Council, says the companies have used the high cost to develop and implement the carbon capture technology as a pretext to delay.
Since no one has actually applied this technology to a power plant because it doesn't make economic sense to do so, the very industry then points to the fact that no one has applied this technology to a power plant to argue that it isn't ready. We don't think that's correct.
What the NRDC and many other environmental groups argue is that the government should ban any construction of new coal plants until they include carbon capture technology.
We're fighting these new coal plant proposals in every place we can because we don't think a coal plant should be built unless it actually captures its carbon, not being ready, but actually capturing.
The Obama administration says it wants carbon capture as soon as possible. It has moved forward with its campaign promise to develop clean coal. $3.4 billion in the new stimulus bill alone. And by all accounts, that's just the beginning. Which brings us back to the industry's ads for clean coal.
We wish we could say farewell to our dependence on foreign energy, and we'd like to say adios to rising energy costs.
These ads are part of a $40 million campaign by the American Coalition for Clean Coal Electricity, a trade association for coal companies, utilities, and railroads. But if you listen closely to these ads, they're not saying clean coal is here just yet.
But first we have to say so long to our outdated perceptions about coal. And we have to continue to advance new clean coal technologies to further reduce...
Does clean coal really exist?
No. I mean, clean coal is an advertising slogan. It's something that cooked up as a sort of promotional slogan to sell the idea that coal can be burned in a clean way.
It's an ad campaign that has put big coal in the spotlight. Joe Lucas is an industry spokesman.
When you hear the environmentalists jumping up and down and saying, don't lie to the American people, there is no such thing as clean coal technology. Coal is dirty.
Well, I learned a long time ago that when my mother told me to go clean my room, I thought I did a very good job of cleaning my room, only to find out she had a different standard of clean. And I think that, and we see this in our polling, the fact that most people clearly recognize how technology has driven the process to reduce traditional pollutant emissions. Folks say that's a great first step. Now go do this next thing.
So let's take a tour of the state-of-the-art clean coal facility.
Opponents have used that logic to ridicule the idea of clean coal in their own ad campaign.
Clean coal harnesses the awesome power of the word clean.
This one was produced by an alliance of organizations that calls itself the Reality Coalition.
Clean coal is supported by the coal industry, the most trusted name in coal.
I watch those ads where